Welcome, everyone. My name is Allison Dennis. I serve as Executive Director for the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. We are an Oregon coast-based nonprofit. The Sitka Center hosts artists, writers, musicians, scientists, and interdisciplinary creatives in residence. We also host public events and exhibits like this one, and art and nature-inspired workshops for everyone from adult beginners to master classes to school-based art literacy classes for elementary kids on the coast. It is a February joy to welcome you to this artist talk celebrating the upcoming 20th anniversary of Sitka's Jordan Schnitzer Printmaking Residency program and the 20th anniversary portfolio of new prints that are now on display in Portland, Oregon at Waterstone Gallery. This exhibit and Sitka's printmaking residency program would not be possible without the visionary and ongoing support of Jordan Schnitzer. Thank you, Jordan, for all you do to champion artists, art making, art education, and art access, Sitka's printmaking program included. We are also above and beyond grateful to Todd Putnam and the whole team at Framing Resource for their work framing this exhibit. Framing Resource has been a longtime supporter of the Sitka Center, so thank you, Todd and team, for your ongoing generosity. Thank you to Sitka's sponsors and foundation supporters, the Harold and Arlene Schnitzer Care Foundation and Jordan Schnitzer, the James F. Marion and L. Miller Foundation, and Marion L. Miller Foundation, the Robert and Mercedes Eichholz Foundation, Oregon Arts Commission, Oregon Cultural Trust, Explore Lincoln City, Scott Ceramic Products, Brian Potter Design, Park Lane Sweets, and Siltstone Wines. Thank you to all of the artists who are participating tonight and in the earlier talk we gave, and all of the artists who have participated in this program over the last 19 and counting years. Thank you to Jane and Frank Boyden, Sitka's founders, and to Julia DeMario, the creative force behind this printmaking program. Frank and Jane, your inspiration is evergreen. And Julia, it's just an honor to work with you and to support this program and the artists that it serves. Tonight, in addition to the artist presentations, there will be time for questions. So for those of you who are participating on Zoom, please share comments and questions using the Q&A feature on your Zoom menu. Spring 2020 and spring 2021, that year, marks the 50th anniversary of Sitka's founding. And needless to say, this was not the 50th anniversary year that we had planned. So on a personal note, as 2020 progressed, this portfolio project became just more and more precious because it felt like the one thing that Sitka was able to see through without canceling it or reinventing it or starting over from scratch. And now with so many signs of hope on the horizon to see this new work from beloved past Sitka artists up and displayed so beautifully by the team at Waterstone Gallery, the portfolio and the show, it just kind of feels like the most needed and welcome crocus bed, like sprouting up at the end of a very long winter. So just so excited to share the work with you. Speaking of the talented team at Waterstone, it's my pleasure now to introduce Minnie Geary, who will share some more about the gallery. So as Minnie unmutes herself, thank you everyone for tuning in. Please share questions using the Q&A. See the show in person if you can at Waterstone and enjoy the art. Welcome, Minnie.
Hi, Allison. Thank you. On behalf of Waterstone Gallery, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Sitka. Thank you to all the artists here today that have taken time out to speak to us. And we are really excited to host your show in our space. It looks fantastic. And I know our team's been working hard at hanging the exhibit, and it does look quite wonderful. It's been well curated. So if you haven't seen it yet, do drop in. We're open Saturdays and Sundays from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. But if you would like to come on another day, if you prefer to be there in the space on your own, you can just call us and make an appointment, and we're happy to open up the space for you so you have it to yourself and socially distant. And yeah, that's about it. So I'll say hand back to Allison or Lisa, and we can get started.
Yeah, thank you. And I just share the thanks and enthusiasm for everyone, and just to wet your whistle just a little bit, if you haven't already seen the exhibition, I just have 2 install shots here of the show. And again, please do come if you're able. It's really a beautiful show. And just so today what we'll do is just have each artist talk a little bit about their work in general, and then the influence of the printmaking residency, or how their work might relate to the print that they did that will be featured in the exhibit. And we'll start with Julia DeMario, who has been our master printmaker for the full 20 years of the program, as Allison noted. So she'll give a little more background about how this came into being, and the brains behind the work. So I'm really excited for that. So please, again, feel free to ask questions. We'll be tracking them, and either ask them to the artist in the moment, or we'll save them for the end and ask them at the end. And so I think without further ado, we'll just jump right in and start with Julia.
Hello, my name is Julia DeMario, and I've been the etching printer for the Jordan Schnitzer Printmaking Residency at Sitka since 2002. I originally met Frank Boyden, the founder of Sitka, at Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, where we did a 2-week collaboration in making some prints. I was the printer, Frank was the artist. He had been making some sculpture at the Walla Walla Foundry, and we were put together by fate and by the printmaking professor at Whitman College to make prints with the students as our assistants and audience. Frank suggested that I apply for a residency at Sitka, which I did with my colleague Kathy Keene, who was also my print colleague at Sitka during the auditioning weeks during the Jordan Schnitzer Printmaking Residency. We went together in 1996 and did our own work, painting, and Kathy did some beautiful work there as well. And in 2002, I went back to New York for my job at Pace Editions. And in 2002, Frank and the then director, Randall Cook, asked me if I would be interested in coming and working with artists in the print studio for a month or longer, and every year. And I said, yes, I would love to do that. My boss, the director at Hutchins, was very flexible about letting me have time to pursue my own art and other opportunities, for which I'm forever grateful. And in 2002, I started by collaborating with Marie Watt and Carl Pilato. And over the years, I've worked with, I think, 44 artists, 2 and now 3 a year come and have 2-week residencies. Most of them have had no prior print experience. Some have told me, oh, I took a printmaking class in undergraduate, but have not pursued it since. So it's been an opportunity to expand. And it's, I think, been a good experience for most of them. And it's been a wonderful experience for me, because even though I give each artist the same information, I give them the same tools, the same materials to make the print, every time an artist comes into the studio, it's a different experience, because it's a different brain and a different creative vision they bring into the studio. And I help them their visions onto copper plate. And the 3rd week of that residency for each artist is the time in which I edition the work they do. Usually every artist produces 4 to 6 prints that they're having, and we do editions of 10. Sitka retains 5 copies and the artist retains 5 along with an artist proof. And in this way, Sitka has accumulated quite an archive of prints and they can show them as they do here at Waterstone, and they've also been shown at the Sitka Art Invitational every year, and also they can sell them and give them to donors as gifts. So it's an asset for Sitka as well as a great experience and asset for the artists. And I guess that's about all I need to say about that. I've also put a few slides together of my own work because in my other life, I'm also an oil painter. And Lisa, if you wanted to start my slides, I will talk a little bit about what I do in my painting studio. While I lived in New York for 20 years, I would find opportunities to leave the city and have a bigger painting space, a studio where I could explore ideas I had but didn't have the space to execute them in my studio in Brooklyn. And in the 3 paintings you're going to see here, it's a triptych of paintings I did in Newfoundland. There was an artist residency. I don't believe it exists in this same form anymore, but 2 artists every year, well, there were 2 artists every month throughout the year invited to be in residence in it was a converted fish and chip shop, actually. And I had the top floor, which had been the kitchen and the dining room, with a full view of the ocean right outside, you know, literally down the rocks from the studio. And I was so inspired by this landscape that I created these paintings of an iceberg migrating down the Atlantic and inserting itself in the cove, which this did happen in the 80s, I believe it was. An iceberg lodged itself in the cove and basically ruined the summer for the residents because it was cold and foggy throughout the whole summer because of this iceberg. And I desperately wanted to see an iceberg while I was there, and I didn't, but I decided to pay homage to the history of this particular iceberg with these paintings. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. And these are topographical. I've always been interested in maps, topographical maps, and Forest Service maps, and just depth charts. The ocean, you see here, the way I painted the ocean was done using old depth charts as well. The topographical maps I found, and it's sort of a bird's eye view. And as each painting, you could go to the next one, please, Lisa. The next one shows there we go. A close-up of the iceberg lodging itself in the cove. And they're all oil on canvas. And every time I go to a residency, or in the past when I would go to a residency, I would explore that region. I did a large map painting of Sitka that year, 1996, when I was in residence there. I do not have a slide of that though, but that was the beginning of my map fascination, and it continues to today. All right, and there's one triptych photograph, the next one. I think, oh, no, yeah, there we go. That's the way I like to see them displayed. All right, thank you. And then the next slide is a map painting I did in the south of France, where I was a printmaking instructor at the Lacoste School for the Arts in 2001. Okay, then that's, next slide, please. Oops.
Did I lose?
There we go. Sorry, I think, okay, there we go.
User error on my end, sorry.
Okay, sorry. So my print work also deals with or uses maps, topographical maps as my source material. And these are all copper plate etchings, aqua tint with burnishing mostly. The middle one is the portfolio print, and the two on either side are part of a series I'm working on based on the Hayes Range, which is a mountain range just east of me in Surprise Valley in Northern California, where I live. I moved here in 2004 with my husband, and we explored those mountains every weekend. We went into a different valley in the eastern part of the valley, and I took details from the Forest Service maps we used to trek or direct us in our treks through the mountains. Okay, next slide. I think it's just a close-up of the print from the portfolio. Yes. This is Little Hat Mountain. 2-plate, 2-color, aqua tint. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. And Julia has the lucky / unlucky luck of going first, which means each time when we did this last week as well, I in my own case of nerves forgot to properly introduce her, and so then she just had to do that for herself. So thanks for that, Julia. I would just add that the work that Julia's done at PACE in particular, but with printmakers in general, is really quite extraordinary. I know that at one point when Jordan Schnitzer met Jim Dine at a printmaking conference, and they sort of made the connection that they both knew Julia having worked with Jim Dine for, it's got to be 30 years now, Julia. Jim Dine just gushed about her talent and the way that he's able to work with her in the printmaking world. So I just really want to say thank you and honor the work that she does. And it was such a delight for me, having known Julia only as a printmaker, to get to see the work that she does in the rest of her life. So it's really wonderful to see the paintings. So thank you. So next up, we have Sabina Haque. Sabina is an artist of South Asian descent who was raised in Pakistan and now lives, teaches, and makes art in Portland. Sabina's immigrant experience has always informed her art practice. She works across various media, including painting, photography, printmaking, animated video, and sound installation, to explore place, memory, and identity. Recent work has focused on investigating placekeeping and neighborhood identity among communities of color in Portland. Sabina received her MFA in painting from Boston University and teaches art at Portland State University. So we're really glad to have her here and hear about her work. So over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Lisa and Julia and everybody at Sitka. Let's start with the first slide. As Julia mentioned, I grew up in Pakistan. My father was born in India, and this is an etching, my first etching that I did ever with a copper etching with Julia in 2015 during my 2-week residency. I did a series of 10 plates, and I did 6, and some of them were on one sheet of paper. So we ended up having a series of 6. This one is called Lost at Sea, and it bears witness to my father's story of displacement and migration during the partition of India. And if most people in America sometimes don't know that the British ruled the subcontinent until 1947, and then very, very quickly dissected the subcontinent into 2 countries, Pakistan and India, and Bangladesh, which was part of Pakistan at one point. And it resulted in 15 million people being displaced over one summer, in fact. And during that time, my father and his siblings and my grandmother actually had to travel by themselves. My grandfather was already in Karachi, and they had a very harassed trip, and the boat actually got stuck in the ocean, in the Indian Ocean, on its way from Bombay to Pakistan. So this is actually a story from that time that my father was able to tell me, and my grandmother. And so I've created a series. Let's go to the next slide. I wanted to jump now to my most recent work that's actually installed for the Paragon Gallery here in Portland. And it started with a performance. And actually, one of my family members is American. My mom is white. She's lived in Pakistan for over 40 years now. And one of our relatives from the American side sort of said, if you don't like it here, go back to your own country. And I thought, wow, that really feels physically like pushing me away. And I wanted to explore this idea. This piece is called Unbelonging, and it's a performance piece that explores the cycle of welcoming and belonging, and how does that urge to push the next newcomer out of the country, how do we all participate in that process? And so go to the next slide, please. So I actually worked with the dancer that is fully silhouetted, and we choreographed a series of 7 minutes where she moved from gestures of welcoming, gestures of pushing away, gestures of balancing, floating. And then we had 3 different artists of color that actually worked with the projection and did live performances. And this was exhibited in the Shaking Tree Theater in 2018. So the next slide shows the installation that came out of the performance, which is so interesting. I worked through a lot of different media, painting, drawing, and now printmaking. With my experience with Julia at Sitka has been really valuable. But in this one, I'm actually painting with India ink and toner pigment. And these are the figures that were in the performance, the gestures that we worked on. There's like swimming and welcoming, pushing away, floating. So if we go to the next slide, these are painted on Duralar, which is a transparent material. I managed to get the ink and the toner pigment to adhere to the surface. And then the landscapes that you see here, that the figures are sort of moving in and out of, and even the viewer moves in and out of. And there's a wonderful video that I'll put in the chat, which shows you the experience of moving through these drawings, because you can see them from both sides. That landscape in the background is the Sonoran Desert on the border between Mexico and Arizona. If we go to the next slide, we'll see another landscape which has the painting of the Kashmir Valley, which is on the border of Pakistan and India. It's also, for the last 70 years, been one of the most contested parts of the subcontinent, because actually the Indian and the Pakistani side draw different maps and actually show the border in different places. So it's actually called a disputed territory. So if you see here, the red line is actually goes along the river. And if you're on one side of the river, you're in Pakistan, and one side is in India. And the line of controls are drawn on the back of the drawing. So you kind of move through that. Let's go to the next slide. And you can see this one, you can actually see the map of the border of the counties in Arizona and Mexico, kind of cutting through the landscape on the reverse. So creates these really transparent sort of fields of movement. And it's one of those pieces that needs to also be moved through in person. And hopefully we'll have more folks to be able to get through to see it in person. Let's go to the next slide. So this brings me back to the inspiration for my portfolio project that I did with Julia. And actually I came to Sitka twice, and there were many different reasons. And one of them is very tragic with Julia's family. But I ended up coming in November of 2020, and I was, affected by all that was happening in the political world. This piece actually was done in 2004 5, and it's called One Nation Under God. And it was done right after 9/11 and when we were invading Iraq. And you can see in this piece, it's a photograph that I've collaged with, I was wearing an American flag, and in 2005, I was using photography and I was doing these mini kind of performances for myself. And I would wrap myself in fragments of the flag that I would cut up, and then I had transcribed and collaged onto it the Bible and the Quran and brotherly love, passages about brotherly love. And so this piece, in the background, you can see the faces of different community members that I had photographed from West Virginia, where I lived at the time, and all these folks of different walks of life. And it was to bring focus on, like, what does it mean to be together? How do we navigate the space? How do we attend to these divides that have been created in this post 9/11 era? So let's move to the next slide. So this photograph was actually originally done in 2005, and it became the source for my drawings and etchings that I presented at the Waterstone and that I worked with Julia. And this piece is called Protest Silenced, and it felt to me like, you know, that process of, like, I don't know, it's a very visceral feeling. And so this is one of the images that I used for the etching that I'm going to show you. And then let's go to the next slide. And these were photographs that I also used as pieces that inform the drawings that I presented. And the one, let's go to the next slide. We'll look at so this is the etching that I did in November 2020. I think it was just a few days or a week or week after the election was complete. And there was a sense of relief, but also a sense of, like, how much more we have to work on. And I worked with so many different materials again and was reminded of all the different wonderful techniques. The face is soft ground, right, Julia? And then the flag and all of that is spit bite with the paintbrush onto the copper plate. And then we decided to use red. And then I did some research on the color blue because the limitations of the plate were only 2 colors, but blue in the flag is symbolic of liberty and justice. And so the removal of the blue, I think, is also poignant, because I think we have a long way to go in finding true justice for everyone in our communities. And so the last slide shows the drawings that are right now displayed with this, and those reference the photographs. So these are graphite and they're watercolor, and the one with the hands on the left is called Justice Denied, and the one over here to the right side with the hands held upright in a gesture are called Waiting and Wanting. And I think that's my silent prayer for us to keep continuing the fight and continuing to push for justice for all of our communities, and keep at it. With that, I have no more to say, I think. Thank you so much for inviting me to this talk.
Thank you. That's really amazing to see your work. I'm really struck by your conversation really helps me see so beautifully the relationship between performance and printmaking, which is something I never expected to understand, but that sense of gesture, that sense of movement and order is really, like, so apparent and across all the mediums and across all of your work. So I'm really grateful. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I've always been acting out my work, and that becomes the source material for the drawings and the paintings. So thank you for that observation.
Yeah, thank you. And now we move alphabetically, but I feel like almost also thematically in terms of that gesture and performance aspect, perhaps, onto Linda Hutchins. Linda is a visual artist whose work tests the limits of body, mind, and self in a reappraisal of the meaning and experience of drawing. Beyond works on paper, her investigations have taken form as site-specific installations, wall drawings, cross-disciplinary collaborations, performances, and custom drawing tools, which she'll share with us. Hutchins has been honored with 2 individual artist fellowships from the Oregon Arts Commission, the Jurors Award in the Tacoma Art Museum's 2009 Northwest Biennial, and a solo exhibition in the Oregon Governor's Office. She holds a BFA in drawing from PNCA and a BSE in computer engineering from the University of Michigan. So I'll pass it over to Linda. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And I just want to start by saying just what a gift it is to be a resident at Sitka, and a printmaking resident in particular. But so just a huge thanks to the whole staff and to Julia and to Jordan for his support. Everyone at Sitka takes so much care with the residents, and yeah, it's a very nurturing experience. So I'm going to start with 2 of the etchings that I did with Julia when I was there in 2013. And she helped me cover so much ground, experimenting with how to make marks in etching with both hands and all 10 fingers. So I had been doing that in drawing, and my challenge to her was, how can I do this in etching? And I think she knew the challenges that would present. I came in completely naive. I thought we could just like tape nails to my fingers and have at it. But I learned really quickly that that etching requires more strength behind the mark in some cases than is possible with an individual finger. So this was this print shows a couple of the ways that we went about it. The linear marks were actually done with my fingernails and soft ground. And the lighter areas in the background are burnishing an aqua tint wearing steel thimbles on all my fingers and just repeatedly attacking the plate. This is an example of some of the work that I do where the mark making is actually percussive. It drove Julia crazy. The racket that made. But there's a rhythm there that helps, that I use to motivate the mark making. So we can go to the next slide. This one was, again, the light areas burnished with thimbles on all my fingers. The linear parts here, I made some special tools, fingertip tools, out of copper pipe fittings that I filed to a sharp point to do dry point. And you'll see those in the next slide. Next, yeah, so on the right there, those are the copper pipe fittings that I filed to a point. But you can imagine that if you're trying to gouge copper, copper is really not the right metal for your tool. So I came back from that residency with just, my mind was exploding with ideas for tools that I wanted to make to allow me to make those fine scratched lines at my fingertip. So you can go to the next slide. I had been drawing by wearing sterling thimbles on all my fingers. And that was really just like the most expedient way I could think of to get marks from all 10 fingers. So in the next slide, you'll see one of my first experiments in metalworking. I actually started taking evening metalworking classes at Oregon College of Art and Craft in order to make these tools that I had in mind. So these are cast out of fine silver, which makes it softer than sterling. So it makes a more satisfactory mark than the sterling did. And also I was able to use those sprues, take advantage of the sprues from the casting process to get a nice fine marking tip, whereas the thimbles are more like drawing with a chunky child's crayon. So these are the tools that I used to make the 2 silver point drawings in the show that you'll see in the next 2 slides. So here I was in residence at Leland Iron Works, and these 2 drawings are made wearing those silver fingertips, striking the paper that was laid onto the steel plate that's the threshold to Lee Kelly's studio. So if you cycle through the next couple of slides, you'll see there's another one. You can see the marks become a kind of rubbing of the texture of that steel plate. And that's even a little more apparent when you see the backside of this drawing. In the next slide, you can see that texture of the plate is just impressed into the paper. So then by the time I came back to Sitka for the portfolio etching, I had spent 2 years at Oregon College of Art and Craft in the evening metalworking class. And to the next slide, you'll see my final tools that these are just the most precious possessions I own. I will not let them out of my sight. So they're custom fitted to each finger, and at each fingertip is a Dremel tool, collet, with a sharp steel point in it. So I've got actually interchangeable drawing tips at the end of each finger. And this is the tool, these are the tools that I brought with me and that I used to make the portfolio print, which is the final image. So a little bit more about this print. This is another example of a composition that is motivated by a percussive rhythm. So the marks in the center come from that rhythm. And then in this print, there's an encoding of that rhythm in the margins on the right and the left. And this, the previous slide, you saw me using the tools in a dry point method. Here, I use them with hard ground. And yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to say.
Linda, you were busy talking, so you didn't see that chat blowing up with minds blown over the evolution of thimbles and the sort of persistence towards finding the right tool, and people, I think, really appreciating you sharing the tools as well as the experience. And I just also wanted to add to that what through immediately for me and what you were saying was this idea of experimentation and how much experimentation it took to get from point A to point B. And again, the excitement of that in this program in particular, and then particular to Julia, the way that she really sort of allows that discovery process even if the sound drives her crazy, perhaps. I just really appreciate that she goes in with that sense of experimentation too, and is sort of joining with you in an experiment. And I don't know, Julia, maybe you sometimes even think you might know the answer to the thing that they're experimenting with, but and if you just sort of let them go anyway, or if you know what that balance is like, it must be interesting.
Well, there's a certain amount of trial and error for sure. I start with what my instincts tell me is the right way to go. And if I see quickly that it isn't the right way, then we veer off and try something else until we come up with a technique that is comfortable and also successful for the art.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Julia just really saved me from so many dead ends. She could just tell me, well, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. And maybe this. So really, I think a lifetime.
You usually don't see that unless I'm sure.
And so I'll just ask this question that, well, there was a comment from Meredith that says, Linda, your work never ceases to amaze me, the lovely relationship between tenderness and movement in the marks. And then Catherine asked if there's any way to fill the screen with the slides, so I might try and do that while you perhaps answer this question, Linda, which is from Denise Mullen. Linda, can you briefly talk about the importance of the percussive action in your drawing and finding silver point as a medium that led to the thimbles?
Yeah, so I loved learning about silver point in art school, and when I would try and explain it to people, I would always say, well, you know how your key will make a mark on the wall? It's the same thing with silver. And, you know, it won't make a mark on plain paper, but it will make a mark if you coat the paper with something like flat wall paint. So when I first had the idea of drawing with both hands and all 10 fingers, really literally, I thought, well, okay, let's make marks on the wall with silver. And so I think the other thing about silver, especially when you're using sterling, which is harder, it makes such a faint mark. So a lot of repetition is required to build up any depth of tone. And that repetition, especially on a wall and really with my whole body into it, it makes a rhythm. I mean, your body just makes a rhythm out of it. So that just became a compelling motivation for those drawings. Yeah, thanks for that question. So nice to see you here, Denise.
Thank you. Okay, and there will be more chance for questions as we go, but I want to move on to Larry, and I may or may not have figured out, I think I did figure out the full screen problem. So last but not least, I wanted to introduce Larry Thomas. I feel like as long as I've known Sitka, I've known Larry's work as part of Sitka, so it's really a pleasure to get to hear him speak about his work. Larry's work is based in the natural landscape, primarily that of the Northern California coast. He taught drawing and printmaking for many years at the San Francisco Art Institute and served as a dean of academic affairs and as interim president of the school prior to retiring in 2005. Each summer for many years, he has taught a drawing intensive workshop at Sitka and also taught drawing at Haystack Mountain School of Crafts in Deer Island, Maine, which is such a beautiful place. His work is in numerous public and private collections regionally and nationally. He currently lives and works in the small coastal town of Fort Bragg, Mendocino County in California. So Larry, over to you. And I've got your first image up here already.
Welcome, and thank you, Lisa, for putting this whole program together today. It's really nice to be here and share the work with the other participants in the print project and to see everyone all at once. And I want to express really deep appreciation and pleasure for, with having worked with Julia on several occasions. And on this print project, it was particularly wonderful to work with her again. So thank you, Julia, for your kind suggestions and your wise counsel on how to make wonderful and beautiful prints. I really appreciate it. Also, I want to thank the staff at Sitka, and in particular Frank and Jane Boyden, and all of the people who have come together to make this printmaking studio and the whole print project possible, and in particular to Jordan Schnitzer for his long support of this project. I first came to Sitka, I think it was in 1991, when I was on sabbatical from teaching. And Sitka was not at all what it is now, or what it grew to be over the years. I believe that was 30 years ago. And as Lisa mentioned, I came back many summers to teach drawing at Sitka, and I looked forward to that for many years. But when I first came to Sitka, it was very small. There was just the Boyden studio and the Morley house, just two buildings, and the offices were downstairs in the Boyden studio. And there was room for only 2 residents at that time. So I came for the fall and winter of 91, 92, and made drawings and paintings. And Randall Cook was the director at that time, and Del Smith was the chair of the board. And we, along with Frank and Jane and Randall and Del, we all talked about what the possibilities might be for Sitka to expand its program to attract a broader mix of artists to come as residents, and what some of the possibilities might be. And that was the beginnings of the conversations about developing a print program, a printmaking studio. So over the next 10 years or so, money was raised and the print studio was built, and the building that now houses the office and the library, that was built, and then 2 additional houses for residents was built. So it was a period of expansion and development and program shifts and changes. It was a period of really important and profound growth for Sitka. And I'm pleased and happy to say that I've watched it and have been a part of that growth over the last 30 years. After that first residency at Sitka, I was invited back to work with Julia after the print studio was established. And that was my first introduction and opportunity to work with Julia and to work in the print studio. I believe that was in 2004 or 2003, somewhere in there. And we made several prints, and I think a couple of them are on display at the gallery right now from that period. And then years went on, and I was invited in 2012 and 2013 to come and do a project at a site that was potentially slated to be part of Sitka's campus at Grass Mountain. And this drawing that we're looking at now was made during that month-long residency on that amazing site that is just a couple of miles down the road from Sitka. And at that time, I was there alone in this magnificent mountaintop retreat, alone and able to really focus and have some very profound encounters and interactions with that amazing landscape and the natural environment there. I think I made, over the period of a month, I think I made 20 some odd drawings that were eventually shown together as a folio project that paid homage to that particular site. And there's a long story that I don't think we have time to go into today about the context that those drawings were made, and the search for the appropriate language that was initially spoken on that land to be included in this folio of drawings. But each day I would go out and do long walks and come back in the afternoons and in the evenings and work late into the night. And these drawings were based on the layering of the environment. It was winter, and the layers of vegetation and the layers of weather that formed the dormant vegetation at that time of the year was the subject of these drawings. Lisa, can you move to the next slide? So all of these were not drawn specifically from the field or in the field, but I brought back into the studio in the afternoons and evenings some of the experiences that I encountered walking over that huge property. It was just astounding. And I used for this series of drawings layers of acrylic wash. I used pencil, I used acrylic colors, I used a lot of sumi ink, I used broad-edged pens, I used brushes. I did a lot of scraping and scumbling back into the sheets and developed this sense of depth and layering that the drawings express. Next slide, Lisa. This is yet another one of that 20 some odd drawings. I might also add that on one occasion, I took a long walk with Frank and another resident, Josie, one afternoon, and we came back to the residence there, the house up on Grass Mountain, and we watched this amazing sunset. And this, from that vantage point, you can practically see China. The stretch of the horizon is so tremendous and grand from that high point. And we watched this sunset, and suddenly we all looked at one another and asked, "Did you see that?" And Josie didn't know what we were talking about, even though she said, "Yes, what was that?" And so Frank and I said, "Well, that was the green flash." And indeed, we all saw simultaneously the great green flash at sunset. And subsequent to that, there was a party in another week or so for New Year's, I believe it was. And Frank and I made a green flash machine that everyone at the party had to sit in front of blindfolded until until we were ready to make this machine flash the green flash at the end of a 20-foot long pipe, where we had blindfolded each participant and forced them to look down this pipe while Frank manipulated colored cells as the sun went down at the end of this pipe, and then there was a bright green flash. We had great fun doing that. Anyway, next slide, Lisa. another drawing from that residency and from that period. It was an amazing place to be in terms of the solitude and the opportunity to be on that land and to have the time to do nothing but focus on a body of work. And I'm ever grateful for that invitation to be there. Next slide. This is from a group of paintings that were made about the same time. And they are large. I believe they're 6 feet by 4 feet or thereabouts, somewhere in that range. They're my height, so I think they're around 6 feet. They are not made from my experience at Sitka or Grass Mountain, but rather from the daily walks along the coast here in Northern California. The whole series of paintings I refer to as Haque Fields, because these very expansive fields on the bluffs along the Northern California coast are rife with all kinds of bird activity, not the least of which are hawks and kites that swoop and dive and hover on the windy headlands along the coast. And that's what these paintings are in response to. They're not literal paintings of any specific place on the coast, rather a combination of experiences and expressions of those experiences. Next slide. It's a wonderful interaction between the edge of the continent and where the ocean is forever pounding the edge of the land, and the land is crumbling into the ocean and providing an amazingly rich biological area of activity. Next slide. And the atmospheric quality, as anyone who's been to this part of the coast no doubt has experienced the fog banks and the very strange and beautiful light, which Oregon also shares in terms of its on the West Coast. It's just an amazing encounter with the natural forces of the landscape, where the sea and the earth combine and join. Next slide. I think that's it, Lisa, in terms of slides.
Yes, I think that's your last one.
I'd like to read a poem, if I
Oh,
might.
Yeah, I'll move forward to that slide.
This is the print that I made with Julia for the portfolio. It's by a wonderful poet, Tom Crawford. And this is the book that I think it's the most recent book of his poems. It's called Such a Waste of Stars. And it reflects, I think, in so many ways, what Sitka stands for, certainly what Tom stood for. And it is a haunting poem, and I used it as the basis for the drawing of the skull of the bird in the reeds. How to draw a better bird. Resist eloquence. Get mad. If your bird is the snowy Clark's grebe, if that's your bird, the one out there sitting on its eggs in a floating nest, stunning bird, serene bird. If that's all you see, then it's no good. You might just as well take your iPhone out. Take a picture for Audubon. That's not a better bird. Better you try to draw the bird almost gone. Take a picture. Better you try to draw the bird almost gone, banging its wings against your heart. Scare us, make it real, like an eraser, big as a house. What you feel knowing the bird's clutch will never hatch. End of a colony, gone bird. Our lives, once a wetland, drained, is the bird you want to draw. So that was the inspiration for this print. And since I made this print over a year ago, I believe, back in the fall of 2019, we've been sequestered since then for the last year. So that was when I worked with Julia. But this past year, being in the studio, I set forth a project of, based on this poem, a series of drawings and a series of letters, alphabet that incorporates a particular kind of letter form with these very intricately detailed drawings of a bird. And it was the impetus for a whole body of work that I'm still in the midst of making. And it just has been a profound experience for me that has lasted throughout this year of being isolated and unable to really interact or converse with other people very, very often. So it's been an important thing for me to have been at Sitka when I was there and to use this imagery for based on the poem, and it's just been a wonderful experience. And I want to thank everyone who has assisted me at Sitka. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this Folio project. And I hope that everybody can get back to some sense of normalcy soon. It's been a real challenge for everyone. So thank you for listening to me Babylon, and I really appreciate being a part of this. So thank you.
I did not call that a I would not call that a babble. I just really appreciated hearing the experience of Sitka and residency in combination with the work so beautifully stated. I really, for those who haven't had the experience of an artist residency, I think it gives them a sense perhaps of what that experience might be like. So thank you for that, and just the experience of Sitka. I just wanted to flash really quickly to this last slide that just reminds folks of where the residence or where the exhibit is, and when it is. And then I wanted to, we'll open it up to questions, and there's a couple of things in the chat that I'll read out. But as I'm stopping sharing here, I also just wanted to ask Minnie if I'm thinking of this weekend and the snow and ice that is currently happening. How do people know if Waterstone Gallery is open this weekend in particular?
Good question, Lisa. As of now, we are open, but should anything change at any point in time, I would say the best option is to just keep an eye on our social media pages, Instagram and Facebook. And if we do need to close the gallery because of unsafe conditions, then we will be posting it there. But also feel free to give us a call or send us an email, and you should hear back from us straight away. Thanks,
Great.
Lisa.
Thank you. Yeah. And I also wanted to say for folks who missed it, or if your friend missed it or was late or whatnot, we will have this up on our YouTube page in the next couple of days. So you can check our YouTube page to see that. And you can find our YouTube page by going to the Sitka website, www.sitka.org. A question here for Larry from Molly Major. Hi, Molly. She asks, there seems to be a connection between your calligraphy and your drawings. would you say those two ways of working influence each other in the gestural feel?
Say that again, Lisa, I'm sorry. Ask me that again.
Yeah, sure. I know. I saw my internet unstable for a second there. Sorry. There seems to be a connection between your calligraphy and your drawings. Would you say those two ways of working influence each other in a gestural feel or other ways?
I think absolutely, yes. And the project that I'm currently working on is a very conscious focus on how they influence one another. There are opposing factors involved with this project that I'm speaking of, a very finely detailed, stippled and crosshatched image, which is intertwined with capital letters that are very boldly drawn with the broad edge pen on waxed paper, which resists the ink and gives it a very bold and almost crude texture. So the balance between the two is not only a physical difference and a physical combination, but it's also something a little more personal and emotional in terms of the qualities that are present in each of the opposing ways of working. So yes, there is definitely a relationship between the two.
Great, thank you. We also had a question from Jeff Schofield for Linda. He asked, Linda, can you tell us more about your approach to organic forms versus rhythmic repetitions, which seem to lead to architectural composition? And that question is specific to you, but I'm actually sort of curious about some of those thoughts, if anyone else had, like, that makes me think of Sabina's work as well. If you had any sort of conversation as well that you wanted to speak to after Linda around rhythm and organic movement. I may be making that up.
Well, I'm not sure if this answers your question, Jeff, but I can say that another aspect of drawing with all 10 fingers and both hands is a kind of automatic bilateral symmetry that often has a kind of Rorschach quality. So when I deliberately sort of keep that on the one axis, then there just inevitably are sort of interesting organic references that come out of it. And when I move the hands around on the page, which is more what you saw in the very first print and in the last print, then it becomes something a little bit different. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's what comes to mind.
Thanks, Linda. Sabina, did you want to add anything?
I can comment on, I think, rhythm and performance aspect of my work and how that definitely plays into the drawings, and they're informed. The large drawings were actually painted on the floor because they were over 7 feet in length and 40 inches in width. And so they had this gesture of the body that was very much part of it. And if you see the close-up, the materiality of it also feels like the gesture of the landscape. So I definitely do see that connection to the images and to the work.
Julia, I'm also curious about, and I just wasn't at Sitka at the time, so I may have missed, I did miss a conversation, but I'd be curious for you to share with folks about how this folio came together in terms of, were you looking for unifying themes in terms of an approach or work, or were we looking for a breadth of experience, or how did that come together? What were some of the thoughts behind that?
The inspiration was Sitka's 50th anniversary. That was the original inspiration I had, and I chose the artists with Frank Boyden, and I conferred on the choice of artists, and we came up with the 9 artists that eventually were asked or invited to make prints, and there was no unifying theme or approach. I wanted each artist to make whatever they wanted, and that is what they did. And I knew from past experience working with each of them that we would have a good time in the studio. And that was, I wanted it to be like a mini reunion, consecutive mini reunion for myself to visit with and just spend time in the studio with each of these artists. And so that's how it came to be, really, the 50th anniversary. I wanted to do something to celebrate Sitka's 50th, and coincidentally, the Jordan Schnitzer Printmaking Residency 20th as well. But it was a way to celebrate Sitka and give something to Sitka as a gift, really. So that was my inspiration.
Great, thank you. It's amazing. We humbly accept the birthday gift. It's really quite extraordinary and is really just so emblematic of the community and of all of you as artists. Oh, and I do have one quick question from Paul and Nikki Z. Larry, where would be the closest place to see your work from San Francisco? Oop, you have to unmute.
The Seeger Gray Gallery in Mill Valley.
Great. Well, I want to wrap up with Julia's beautiful mention of gifts, and just say what a gift it is to have each of these artists and all of the artists that come to Sitka as a part of the community, and the gift of this program being originally created by all the heads that work, the Boydens, Rand Cook, Julia, and so many more. Larry, I loved hearing your piece of your piece in that story as well. So thank you for that. Please do share if you enjoyed this, share it with others so they can enjoy it as well. The link to our YouTube page also has the artist talk we did last week with 4 of the other 5, including Julia, of the other artists. So it's just a really great opportunity to learn more about this process. And thanks again to Waterstone Gallery. And wherever you are, please stay safe, and in Oregon, warm, because it's cold here today. And thank you all for coming tonight.